The Spirit of the Holy One is with us, the light of hope for the world. Welcome everyone to this online Sunday service from Bentleigh Uniting Church in Melbourne. We gather on this midwinter's day from the comfort of our homes, whether through printed word or through the gift of technology. We are a community scattered, yet together in spirit. We gather in the welcoming presence of our God of gentle compassion, of infinite love. This prayer. Holy One, in the stillness of this winter solstice day, quieten us to listen, reflect, and learn. May our spirits be expanded in love, lifted in hope, and strengthened in courage. Amen. For this winter solstice morning, I have a reflective poem by Jan Richardson entitled A Blessing for Travelling in the Dark. It reflects on what the darkness might mean for us and the hope of love that there is for us. A blessing for travelling in the dark. Go slow if you can, slower. Move slowly still. Friendly, dark, or fearsome. This is no place to break your neck by rushing, by running, by crashing into what you cannot see. Then again, it is true, different darks have different tasks. And if you have arrived unawares, if you have come to peril or in pain, this might be no place you should dawdle. I do not know what these shadows ask of you, what they might hold that means you good or ill. It is not for me to reckon whether you should linger or you should leave. But this is what I can ask for you, that in the darkness there be a blessing, that in the shadows, that in the night, you be encompassed by the love that knows your name. The love that knows your name. A blessing for travelling in the dark. And so we come to our prayers of gratitude, lament, and renewal on this winter solstice morning. This prayer. Creator God, we come in great gratitude that you created the seasons for a purpose. Spring is full of expectation, buds breaking, frosts abating, and an awakening of creation before the first days of summer. The summer sun gives warmth and comfort to our lives, reviving aching joints, bringing colour, new life, and crops to fruiting. Autumn gives nature space to lean back, relax, and enjoy the fruit of its labour, mellow colours in sky and landscape as the earth prepares to rest. Then the gift of winter, cold and bare as nature takes stock, rests, unwinds, sleeps until the time is right. An endless cycle and yet a perfect model. We need a winter in our lives, a time of rest, a time to stand still, a time to reacquaint ourselves with the faith in which we live and breathe. It is only then that we can draw strength from the one in whom we are rooted. Take time to grow and rise through the darkness into the warm glow of springtime, to blossom and flourish, bring colour and vitality into this world, your garden. Warming God, as we remember the cycles of life and the time of winter, inviting us to turn inwards, we pause to reflect on the choices in our lives. We lament the ways we have fallen short of our best selves, the times we've held back from fully and freely expressing the love and care that you call us to share with one another. May we be prompted to be more expansive and more inclusive through gracious generosity and compassion. Touch us again that we will know that we are accepted and forgiven, that we are affirmed and someone of worth, and that we are generously blessed. Help us to rejoin ourselves with your way of love and life. Strengthen us to find more loving ways to live in community with one another. This is our prayer. Amen. We come to our scriptures for this morning. We begin with the psalm. Today's psalm is a song of thanksgiving for God's compassion and care. It occurs in a time of the psalmist's distress. The psalmist is experiencing some severe distress, some trouble. I encourage you to listen for the psalmist's confidence in God's faithful, loving presence throughout this time of trouble, time of need. I read to you Psalm 86, verses 1 to 10. Open your ears, Eternal One, and answer me, for I am weak and helpless. Save me from death, for I am loyal to you. Protect your faithful one, for you are my God, and I trust in you. Have mercy on me, O God, for I pray to you all day long. Make your faithful one glad, for I lift my soul to you, Eternal One. You, O God, are good and forgiving, full of constant love for all who call on you. Listen to my prayer, O God. Hear my cries for help. I call to you in times of trouble, because you answer my prayer. There is no other God like you, Eternal One, not one who can do what you can do, nor are there any works like yours. When you act, all the nations will come and bow down before you, O God, and will pay honor to your name. How great you are, worker of marvels. You alone are God. Psalm 86. We come to our First Testament reading for this morning. In today's reading from Genesis, we will hear one of the biblical stories of the ancestors of our faith. The reading focuses on Abraham and Sarah, spiritual ancestors of the Israelites and modern Jews, and on Hagar and Ishmael, ancestors of the Arabs and major figures in Islam. In this Genesis account, we're told of Hagar and Ishmael's banishment into the wilderness, the desert wilderness. This occurs reportedly at God's direction. Now, modern feminist critique of this aspect of the story points to its patriarchal authorship and queries that Abraham acted on God's wishes or took direction from his wife Sarah. In any event, we do learn that Abraham reluctantly casts out Hagar and Ishmael. Sarah's fear and jealousy of the firstborn, Ishmael, threatened to destroy Abraham's household. Hagar and Ishmael must find their way through the desert wilderness. Once their supply of water is depleted, Hagar fears that she and Ishmael will perish. But God's comforting presence enables Hagar to see a well, and they are given hope for new possibilities, a new future. A key message for us to listen for in this story is that our God is present to us, no matter how great our sense of isolation or depth of devastation. We're given a well in the wilderness, a well in the desert. We're called forward to find new pathways, new possibilities. And so I read to you Genesis chapter 21, verses 8 to 21. The child grew, and on the day of weaning, Sarah and Abraham held a great feast. But Sarah noticed the child that Hagar the Egyptian had borne for Abraham, playing with her child Isaac. She demanded of Abraham, "Send Hagar and her child away. I will not have this child of my attendant share in Isaac's inheritance." Abraham was greatly distressed by this because of his son Ishmael. But God said to Abraham, "Don't be distressed about the child or about Hagar. Heed Sarah's demands, for it is through Isaac that descendants will bear your name. As for the child of Hagar the Egyptian, I will make a great nation of him as well, since he is also your offspring." Early the next morning, Abraham brought bread and a skin of water and gave it to Hagar. Then, placing the child on her back, he sent her away. She wandered off into the desert of Beersheba. When the skin of water was empty, she set the child under a bush and sat down opposite him, about a bowshot away. She said to herself, "Don't let me see the child die." And she began to wail and weep. God heard the child crying, and the angel of God called to Hagar from heaven. "What is wrong, Hagar?" the angel asked. "Do not be afraid, for God has heard the child's cry. Get up, lift up the child and hold his hand, for I will make of him a great nation." Then God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water. She went to it and filled the skin with water, and she gave the child a drink. God was with the boy as he grew up. He lived in the desert and became a fine archer. He made his home in the desert of Paran, and his mother found a wife for him in Egypt. Genesis 21. Our gospel reading this morning is from the gospel storyteller Matthew. It's important to remember that today's reading from Matthew was written in the context of the struggles of the early church, struggling in the face of opposition from their families and at times persecution for their faith. Modern biblical scholars have queried the likelihood that Jesus would deliberately create conflict by saying, "I did not come to bring peace, but a sword," as it appears to contradict other sayings of Jesus where he recommends unqualified love. The sentence appears to have been formulated by Matthew's church community in the context of their persecution. Today's passage contains some difficult sayings about family ties, but I think Matthew's fundamental message is that we are people being formed by the future and not the past. To be dominated by one's family is to be dominated by the past. And we know that Jesus would not let people be dominated by their past. These sayings about family relationships concerned family ties, not emotions. In Matthew's society, a person's primary loyalty was to blood relatives, especially parents. The failure to honour parents meant a loss of face, loss of honour, and led to ostracism. So the saying in today's reading about family ties may well have originated as a retort to people who used family ties as an excuse to not become a follower. Matthew's Jesus points to a path of discipleship, a path that means taking a stand in spite of the risks. At the same time, Jesus reassures the disciples of God's care for them, Even the hairs on their heads are numbered. I read to you Matthew chapter 10, verses 24 to 39. A student is not superior to the teacher. The follower is not above the leader. The student should be glad simply to become like the teacher, the follower like the leader. If the head of the house is being called Beelzebub, how much more the members of your household? Don't let people intimidate you. Nothing is concealed that will not be revealed, and nothing is hidden that will not be made known. What I tell you in darkness, speak in the light. What you hear whispered, proclaim from the housetops. Don't fear those who can deprive the body of life, but can't destroy the soul. Rather fear the one who can destroy both body and soul in Gehenna. Are not the sparrows sold for pennies? Yet not a single sparrow falls to the ground without your Abba God's knowledge. As for you, every hair of your head has been counted. So don't be afraid of anything. You are worth more than an entire flock of sparrows. Whoever acknowledges me before others, I will acknowledge before Abba God in heaven. Whoever disowns me before others, I will disown before Abba God in heaven. Don't suppose that I came to bring peace on earth. I came not to bring peace, but a sword. I have come to turn a son against his father, a daughter against her mother, in-law against in-law. One's enemies will be the members of one's own household. Those who love mother or father, daughter or son more than me are not worthy of me. Those who will not take up the cross and follow me are not worthy of me. You who have found your life will lose it, and you who lose your life for my sake will find it. These are words of faith. Thanks be to God. I now offer this reflection. Today is the shortest day, the winter solstice. The winter solstice is the day of the year that has the least daylight hours. Notably, the word solstice means sun still. According to Fred Watson, astronomer at the Australian Astronomy Observatory, the sun stands still in the sense that its northern and southern journey stops. Sun still. It seems a fitting metaphor for the opportunity afforded by the early darkening winter days for stillness, for stopping and taking time for reflection, for our inner growth, while the growth of nature quietly continues within the darkness of the earth. In particular, I think this stillness offers us time to reflect on the kind of society we want to create post-COVID-19. Tomorrow is the 43rd anniversary of the Uniting Church in Australia, and so it is both appropriate and timely that this month our Church has outlined a set of principles and key actions that will guide the way to a better future as Australia recovers from the coronavirus pandemic. Uniting Church President Dr. Deirdre Palmer points out that as Australia looks to a post-COVID-19 world, we have a unique opportunity to renew our vision, to reimagine policy, and to find creative ways to rebuild a nation that is just for everyone. Dr. Palmer notes that the COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted the stark inequality and disparity in our Australian society and exacerbated the disadvantage faced by our most vulnerable people. She observes that one of the key learnings in this time of crisis is how deeply we are connected to one another, how deeply we depend on each other. What we have seen clearly is that we are only as strong and healthy as the most vulnerable members of our society. Today's scriptures provide valuable messages to help guide our path forward, guide our path to foster our wholeness and well-being as a society. Whoever we are, wherever we find ourselves, whatever our strengths and struggles, Whatever the challenges and complexities of our lives, there's a message for us here. In the story of Abraham's family, we see that God is willing to work with imperfect people, people struggling to deal well and wisely with one another. In this troubled family tale, their society's high value on women's ability to bear children threatens Sarah's status, and so her attendant, effectively a slave woman, is sexually exploited by Sarah to supply Abraham with a child, Ishmael, an enforced surrogacy. However, when Sarah subsequently gives birth to Isaac, she grows jealous and resentful of Ishmael's firstborn status. She inflicts harsh treatment on Hagar and incites Abraham to banish Hagar and Ishmael to the desert wilderness. A foreign outsider, a victim of economic and sexual exploitation and of domestic violence and inequality, Hagar finds herself expelled, powerless, exposed, afraid, homeless, and hungry and thirsty. While the cultural context of this ancient story may seem quite removed from us, our contemporary social contexts are no less characterised by injustices, ethnic prejudice, abuse of power, and issues of domestic violence and gender inequality. Biblical scholar Juliana Classens observes that Hagar's story is reminiscent of so many other women today who find themselves in an impossible situation, trapped in the web of poverty with all the violations of human dignity that come with it. In our Australian context, Hagar's experience in many respects mirrors the plight of dispossessed Indigenous peoples who were forced inland by white settlers, the predicament of asylum-seeking foreigners effectively banished to detention centres, and the persisting desperate circumstances faced by women and children fleeing domestic violence. In particular, Indigenous women and children, as well as men, continue to struggle against racial discrimination and abuse, brought into sharp focus in the recent Black Lives Matter protests. The story of Abraham and Sarah, Hagar and Ishmael, offers us the opportunity to reflect on our own participation in perpetuating racism, whether passively or actively, and our own responsibility, collectively and individually, to address persisting social injustices. Yes, the issues are complex, and we too face times of fear and uncertainty, situations that might overwhelm us, that might discourage our hopefulness. Yet, as the psalmist asserts, we are not alone. We're not alone in our fears and difficulties. Our God is a strengthening, encouraging presence. God seeks to reassure and strengthen us. God says to Hagar, "Do not be afraid." The presence of bushes under which Ishmael is placed means the presence of water. And with the cloud of despair lifted, Hagar's eyes are fully opened and she is able to see a well. Mother and child are comforted. Their thirst is quenched. Hagar is strengthened to find a way forward, a way out of the desert wilderness. And they are given the hope of a new beginning. Hagar is promised that, as with Isaac, Ishmael will be a father to a great nation. There is new hope for the future. God can work with our imperfections and complexities to shape better, even beautiful lives. New possibilities can open up for us, for our communities, for our world beyond COVID-19. No matter the devastation, God calls us forward to rebuild our lives, to rebuild our nation, to find new possibilities, new pathways toward wholeness and well-being for all people, and renewal of the whole creation. Today's Gospel reading encourages us to be fully committed to the way of the Spirit of Jesus, to look to the future to which Jesus points us, to that bigger vision of God's domain. It seems to me that Matthew's fundamental message is that we are people being formed by the future and not the past. Matthew's Jesus points us to follow in the way of true wholeness. It means taking a stand in spite of the risks, toils, and hardships along the way, keeping our hearts and minds focused on this vision of God's domain, God's kingdom, to keep our hearts focused on the way to fullness of life. And this can support and inspire us to press onwards. The tale is told of a traveller in the Middle Ages who came upon a place in France where a great deal of building work was going on. He began talking with the stonecutters and asking them about their work. He approached the first worker and asked, "What are you doing?" The man, very disgruntled and obviously unhappy in his hard day-to-day toil, replied, "I'm cutting these huge boulders with the simplest of tools and putting them together in the way I've been told to do. I'm sweating in this heat and my back is hurting. What's more, I'm totally bored and I wish I didn't have to do this hard and meaningless job." The traveller moved on quickly to interview a second worker. He asked the same question, "What are you doing?" The second worker replied, "Well, I have a wife and children at home, so I come here every morning, and I work these boulders into regular shapes, as I'm told to do. It gets repetitive sometimes, but it helps to feed my family, and that's all I want." Somewhat encouraged, the traveller went on to a third worker. "And what are you doing?" he asked. The third worker responded with shining eyes. And he pointed upwards to the heavens. "I'm building a cathedral." This third worker was able to positively persist with the laborious task of stone cutting, sustained by a strong spirit of commitment to his bigger vision, a hope-filled spirit that could envision the future possibilities emerging from a heap of hefty boulders. It is to such a spirit of commitment that we too are called. Each one of us, no matter our imperfections, can commit to a bigger vision, to being a loving, life-giving presence in our families, our communities, our cities. And together, enlivened by God's good spirit, we can co-create justice, shape reconciliation, and build compassion so that all people may flourish. And so we come to our prayers for all people, for others and ourselves. This prayer: God of all seasons, during this time called winter, leaves are gone from our trees, winds chill each morning sunrise, colours have faded from our gardens. Yet we also sense that this time called winter is also a time of mystery, for it speaks of the unknown, the unseen. May we experience during this season times when we need to be silent and when to listen. May each winter day surprise us again and again, and as spring follows winter, may the beginnings and dreams planted at this time come to new promise, even in the midst of change and loss. As we reflect on the issues of this day in our wider world, may we honour the many ways in which our sisters and brothers in many places weave healing and hope into the world. The medical teams and carers and all essential workers who work to heal the sick, and keep our community safe. Together, may our common desires for peace, justice, and a more compassionate world create within us the courage and opportunity to work together to create a better life for all. This morning, we remember those who find winter a time of loneliness and coldness through a lack of companionship. We remember those who must isolate at home at this time. May we be willing to share the warmth of friendship and care with them. We are mindful of those who live on the streets of our cities and towns. May we support policies and programs aimed at addressing their need of shelter and protection. We know there are people in our wider community who feel exiled through shame or guilt, torn from the warm hearths of family and community. May we extend to them arms of openness and acceptance. As we experience the depths of winter, half the planet is living in the heat of summer. May we remember with wonder the balancing of the Earth's resources and our interconnection with one another. Let us not lose sight of the bigger picture amidst our everyday joys and struggles. We remember our families, partners, children, loved ones, and work colleagues. May their seeds of new life, their new beginnings, big and small, receive nourishment from the soils of our love and care. We are mindful of those among our church community who are suffering from illness, of those who are grieving, of those who are rehabilitating from surgeries and injuries, and those experiencing pain and losses arising from ill health. Let's pause a moment as we bring to mind those we know have special or particular needs at this time. May all those in need know the comfort of your consoling, caring presence. Loving God, across these shorter wintry days, keep our eyes open to the presence of your light, within us, amongst us and beyond us, ever guiding us in the warmth of your love. This is our prayer. Amen. And this blessing, a blessing of the dark sky, be yours, of the white moon and the faraway stars. A blessing of the cold earth be yours, of the frost and puddles of rain. A blessing of a warm hearth be yours, of a lighted fire and a peaceful home. A blessing of God our Maker, storyteller, and good spirit be yours, this winter day and forevermore.